Mr. Tony Stringfellow. Maestro of rhyming drips. Thank you, wordy worm. Well, it has been a bit wet, hasn't it? What can I say? So what have I got today to brighten you? To bring the sunshine out in your life? What have I on this page one? I hate it when paper gets wet. Well, in paragraph 1, I'll be looking at the poetry of A.E. Housman. And then in paragraph 2, I'll be talking to John Harrison. A poet that uses poetry to address child abuse, amongst other things. And then the final word this week goes to Mary Braithwaite from Southport.
Paragraph 2.
You're listening to Tony Stringfellow with page 1 on 101.8 WCR FM. That's just in case you'd forgotten, which I know you haven't, because if you had, you wouldn't still be there, would you, listeners? No. On the phone now, I've got John Harrison, who's a poet from Andover, is that right?
That's right, yeah. Andover, Hampshire, yeah.
Isn't that where the tax office is?
I'm not sure.
I think it is, actually. Ken Dodd does a joke about it being in Andover.
Oh, right, yeah. No, because of that, yeah. Don't worry, I haven't had it for a while, but yeah. Andover, definitely.
So John, you've been writing poetry off and on for quite some years.
Yeah.
And you stopped at one point to become a builder, I understand. Is that right?
Yeah, it was more that most of the writing I started to get into was writing songs, and I had to give up the guitar, and because I had dermatitis from the building, actually.
Oh, right.
And so I sort of, it was my dream had ended there, so I just carried on with just building and not writing for many years.
But you've rediscovered and regained your confidence within the niche of poetry, yeah?
Yes.
Your poetry comes from a very personal place, as a lot of ours does, but yours is a particularly painful personal place, is it not?
Yes. It's culminated really in most of my poetry is either about child abuse or the effects later on in life.
Not wanting to go into too much detail about your past, but can you give us a little outline on your where this has come from, so that listeners at least understand a little bit?
Yes, certainly. Up until I was about 10 years old, that part of my life is a complete blank. But it might be strange for some people to understand. At the point when I was 11 and I looked back, it didn't look like that, and I carried on life as if nothing had happened. But that remained a complete blank. I went through life believing things that unfortunately weren't true, so I was being told things about my past that weren't true because most of it was made up. And I carried on in life with effects of abuse in my health psychologically, and that without even realising. But it came out over a period of time with a few flashbacks. At the time, I didn't know that's what they were called, and as a child, I didn't understand. So I carried on and carried on. But I had what I can describe really as a breakdown in my 30s, and I assumed it was work and it was stress from the business and all these things. And then after a few years of being ill, it started to come out, and I had it confirmed by another individual that I had been abused as a child. And so I've got...
Can I just interrupt you there, because I know people are going to think not a lot of people are not going to be able to understand that you can get to your 30s and not realise, not remember. Could you clarify how that would happen for listeners?
It is difficult. It's difficult for the person. Myself, it does sound strange, but I think the easiest way for people to understand is that when traumatic events happen to people at any period in their life, there are a few safety mechanisms within a person. A child, if it's so hideous, the mind, it blocks it out because it can't deal with it, it can't cope with it. But it's difficult for me to understand. I mean, it's like now. I mean, I'm 39, but to remember my past, I have glimpses, but I can't remember the whole thing. I can look at a photo of a child and I don't know who he is. For some people, it's only a temporary thing, like a road accident. It can happen to people. I mean, it happens a lot of times with road accidents. People will say, I remember driving down the road, boom, I remember waking up in hospital. Yeah. It's a long period of time, obviously, in my case and cases like mine. But that's the only way, really.
I mean, I know a lot of us who've had happy childhoods, and I had a happy childhood. I can't deny that, but I don't remember all of my childhood. Yeah. You don't remember things before a certain age. Not many people do anyway. But you do remember certain events, certain things. Yeah. Now, I have a little bit of when you say looking at the photographs, I had a brother that was killed before I was born in a tragic accident. Okay. And I see photographs of me before I was 4.5, sort of thing, and I don't know which is which when I see the photographs, whether it's me or it's him. Yeah. And I can't remember certain events. So for somebody like yourself, that's it must be even more difficult to collate things, to collate your life, really. Yeah. Well, the sad thing for me, on a personal level for me, was. The problem is you end up, people tell you things that aren't true. So basically, I got to a point when I realised, and then I looked at the people around me, some family members and other members, people around me, that knew about this, and I didn't, and I started to think things like that I didn't know them. These people I'd known all my life. Some people, a lot of them I love and still do. I didn't know them, and it was so profound for me that it was my whole life was based on a lie. Can I just ask, if you don't mind answering, were you brought up by your own parents? Or yes, I was brought up. I was brought up by my own parents, and we lived pretty much in the middle of nowhere in Devon till I was 11. I mean, this is a thing that I was always believed that I came to Andover because of a relationship breakdown, but that was only part of the truth. It was actually, obviously, there was a lot more going on. I mean, I've got scars, broken bones. Lots of people have, but are we talking emotional scars? Well, they are actually more serious, to tell you the truth. But no, I have got physical. Right. Yeah, I've got physical. And of course, we're going back to, if my maths is correct, to the 1960s. Sorry? We're going back to the 1970s. That's right. Yeah. 70s, yeah. I was going to say. My maths isn't correct. No, 1970s. I always lie forward. I should say it's 1980 I was born, but yeah. Yes. But as I'm sure listeners will know, these things are happening sadly now. They were happening before me. It is obviously a personal thing to me, but it got to a point where it's destroyed my life, a part of my life, so much, and it's carried on that way. Through, I have to admit, myself as well.
you do end up, people self-harm, sadly, but you can self-harm in ways that people might not understand because they don't see the physical scars down someone's arm, for instance, but there's starving yourself and all sorts of ways of not going out and punishing yourself. And it got to the point that I just said to myself, obviously I can't change all these things, but I still want to, even though it's impossible. But all I can do is make it all for nothing, that it's not all for nothing. And that is my main goal. And with other people as well, to try and support each other to bring it more to the forefront. I mean, one of the things that I personally find is that I would like people to be more aware of these abuse issues, especially later on in life. Also, it's airing the silent voice, but it's not just the abused. I mean, there are plenty of people out there that have never been abused that would love to be able to stand up somewhere or write in somewhere to a show or to, on any radio station to support abuse victims, but on a regular basis.
It's very difficult for people that haven't been abused to understand the effect it can have on somebody's life. Now, one of the ways that you have dealt with this is through poetry, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
And you've used your poetry to express your feelings, express your emotions.
Yes.
Now, quite often when I do workshops, I explain to people that writing poetry can be a very cathartic process. Obviously, you've found it to be that. Yeah?
Yes, sorry, yes.
At what level, I suppose, let's put a gauge on this, 1 to 10, have you found poetry a kind of cathartic use to you?
100%.
100%?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because as we were speaking before we went on air, I never chose to write poetry. It's hard to say. Some things it's hard to say them without coming across in a sort of boastful manner. Oh, look at me, I'm gifted, or whatever. It's not like that. It's just the fact that I used to, stuff comes out in me sometimes. I mean, for example, I wrote a poem called The Rock.
Yeah.
I just got up one day. I wasn't thinking about rocks. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, and words come into my head. I write them down on a pad, and it's almost like it's being dictated to me. I can hear the words in my head. I write them down, and this is the best form of poetry for me personally that I write. And sometimes I sort of look back, and although obviously I've wrote it, but it's almost like reading it for the first time. And it's when that happens, you do actually. I personally do feel creative.
Yeah.
That's really the perfect way that it comes out in me. And obviously all the issues involved come out in the stuff I write, and it's because it comes from within. And it flows out, and sometimes it flows out in a way that you might change the odd word here and there, but it's pretty much how it is. The ways of write poetry, sometimes I do think of something I want to write about, and I will sit down and have some ideas and then write a poem, but I do prefer it when it comes out in the other way.
Yeah, there are two forms, aren't there? There's the kind of just natural inspiration, and then there's the working at it sort of area.
Yeah.
I think healthily you have.
Working at it.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to do both though, otherwise the sort of natural inspiration one isn't as good. Like if you don't do it, so you have to get the balance. I think at this point, I think we need to hear one of your poems, and I think as you just mentioned it, we should hear The Rock.
Okay, I'd just like to mention that this one I have actually dedicated to NAPAC, and like you said, it's called The Rock. I crawled from under a rock to be here today. It seems too harsh to say, from so very far away from my comfort zone, my rock, my home. I was only doing what you wanted. You wanted me to be seen and not heard. You know it well enough, so it's not so absurd. But to you it seems so easy. You could block me out, easy peasy. But every now and then, the others heard of us. One or two even created a fuss. Hush, hush, I say. I was afraid. I didn't know what to do. what and where it would lead to. You know I fear you, but you know I love you. For a moment I was so visible, but then you came and I disappeared. The silence was loud, so loud no one could hear. I hid alone with my fear. It was then that it came to me. As I crouched there, I saw the rock, so I crawled under it till you all forgot. I crawled from under a rock to be here today. Oh, I know what some of you will say. Why don't I crawl back under my rock, the one that in time some forgot? But now I know, and I must tell you this face to face. I'm afraid I can't, for someone else has taken my place.
I think you should explain NAPAC.
Yes, I would love to. I just like to mention my short history with them. I came across them as like lots of things on the internet. I've had so many bad experiences with trying to get help for myself. But I came across NAPAC, their website. I looked at it, and they were the first ones. I sent one of my first major poems when it comes to abuse that was spot on for me. I sent it to them. You can submit your poems as an abuse victim, and they can put them on their site. They started basically, from my understanding, the person that started it, he couldn't get the help he needed from phone lines. A lot of them were for children, which is brilliant, don't get me wrong. But the National Society for the Protection of Cruelty Against Children helped support the NAPAC. They've been going, I think it's about 12 years. They're a national charity, and it is the National Association for People Abused in Childhood. And personally myself, I would like to see the organisation get a lot bigger, because although it's a national charity, they are quite small at the moment. This year they've just got a bit of lottery funding, which is really, really, really brilliant, because with these troubled times, I'm sure some people will know, some people won't know, there are a lot of charities out there that are doing good things that will struggle in these sort of times. But they have got a phone line, but they need, like all charities to begin with, they need more money to man these phones with volunteers, because they obviously need offices and you need the lines and stuff. But I personally have actually never rung their phone line. It seems strange. I mean, I did ring the Samaritans on 4 occasions, which I found wonderful. But my thing with NAPAC, on a personal level, I just love the fact that people can put their poetry on their website. And for me, as I'm sure you understand as well, it's a very powerful thing. And there are people out there, sadly, who may not be known as poets, but they write some of the most beautiful poetry you will ever read anywhere. I think
the greatest poetry comes from the heart. It always does, and comes from true feelings. And I mean, obviously, some people, it might not be the greatest poetry, but it is because it's expressing how they feel. And to me, an honest way of expressing how you feel is what poetry is either all about, or certainly should be promoted using. And it's wonderful for those individuals who may not ever write a book, or may not ever have their poetry published, or be able to stand in front of an audience. For me, when it happened to me, it was the first time I'd actually had anyone publish any of my poetry, and I was very upset, I was very tearful, but it was a very beautiful, powerful thing for me. It's like, I've had my say, this has come out of me, this is how I feel. There's nothing more moving than the truth. That's the key thing. And I think there's two things to think about. The people that write poetry in this way are not necessarily writing it to be the world's greatest poet. That's not the agenda. No. They're writing it to express their feelings, to draw attention to certain issues, and it's very different from setting yourself up as a professional poet sort of thing. It's a different motive. But as I say, there's nothing more moving than the truth. I think we should mention NAPAC's web address, which is www.napacfr.org.
Yeah.
napac.org.uk.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And John, I think we'll take a page break there
Okay.
and let people absorb that, and then we'll come back after a little bit of music. I'm back now with John Harrison. Now, John, you mentioned that you're 39.
Yes.
My wife's 40 this week. So you've kind of come to poetry in itself, although you've done it all your life. You've kind of come out as a poet quite late in life.
Yes.
Seriously, shall we say.
Yeah.
And we've already covered that it's been a great cathartic exercise for you. When did you realise that you could use it as such a powerful tool? Because it's not only a tool for you, you're not only using it as a tool for you to get your own emotions out, you're using it almost, forgive the word because it's not the right word, but almost as a propaganda tool to raise awareness of abuse generally, aren't you?
Yes. I suppose, as you said, I mean, when it's about 10 years ago, when my health deteriorated, I couldn't work. I basically, what it is, I just started, after a few years, I decided I was going to write a journal, and I was just going to basically how I felt. And I questioned a lot of the people around me, obviously, but also specialists and stuff like that. And I didn't know where I was coming and going, what was going on. I had no answers. So I decided to do a journal of how I felt. This came out in the form of doing like entries, like a diary, but also short prose. Then the poetry started to come out, but it wasn't till probably, it was always a powerful tool for me within myself, but no one had heard it. But probably about 2 years ago, like I mentioned, NAPAC, when I started to do that, that's when I started to think, hang on, someone else might even be interested, in seeing my poems. And in the last 2 years, and especially this year, I've taken my writing more seriously, and I know other people have, and not just abuse victims. And so it's the last 2 years that, but the last probably a bit less than a year, but about a year, is when I started to realise that other people found it, sometimes hard, as you know, to find the right words, but found it powerful, were moved by it personally through their experiences, and also, like I said, it's important to realise that there are people that are interested and that haven't been abused, because they want to understand, or they just want to share your sorrow that it happens to anyone. So it's definitely the last year has been more powerful for other people, I've realised.
You've gone from kind of strength to strength in a lot of ways, because through this, I mean, I think that you mentioned writing a journal, you mentioned writing prose, but I think probably the beauty of poetry is that it can be concise, and it can be a short piece that is complete but expresses a full emotion.
Yeah,
a full
100%,
experience.
yeah.
And that is the big difference between poetry and prose, because as soon as you start writing prose, you've got to tell the story. You've got to go into lots of detail, and it's got to have a beginning, a middle, and end, and all that sort of stuff, which poetry has to a degree, but it's more concise. But not only have you found that outlet, but you've also got to the point of performing with your poetry, and performing quite confidently.
Yes, yeah, which I was surprised for the first time I did, yes.
Which, coming from your background, is obviously, I would imagine that your confidence suffered immensely.
Yes, the tool, not that I used, but that was in me to get over that, was the fact that I can't change the past. All I can do, is do something about it now.
Yeah.
And the biggest tool for me is, yes, if I win battles personally, it is great, but it's even a more beautiful tool or powerful thing if it helps others.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's a video clip on your website of you performing in the streets of London, isn't there?
yes, and
That's got to be quite brave.
Thank you for saying that, and that people do say that. It was just the fact that I so wanted to get out there, and I so want to get people to hear our voice, because our voice is not being heard by so many. We could go on all day about who it is and blame and all that, but the point is, our voice is not being heard, and we are the ones. All of us, everyone whose voice it is important to hear, because we sort of know something about it, and that is forgotten by so many people that are involved in trying to deal with the issues involved, prevention, and help with people later in life and that.
Of course, the thing is, sorry to interrupt, but I think the thing is, there are many forms of abuse. There are many forms of racism issues, all sorts of things. The one thing about child abuse, and as opposed to visual disabilities or racism or whatever, is there is no visual element to it. People see you on the street, they don't know that you've got issues from your childhood because you've been abused. You haven't got a rubber stamp on your head. So people don't see anything. They don't see anything that they've got to deal with.
Yeah. And I think you're dead right. I mean, obviously there are people with but they will hide them. You know, there are people that have got lots of physical scars, but I mean, like a lot of subjects, there's a taboo and stuff. But the other thing is, and I do understand, is that, for instance, I mean, I've read a few books, but I only done that because of my website. I put it on there. I was never interested in reading about things that happen to other people, because it's a very painful thing for me to go through with, and to see it to other people is actually, I'd rather be the only one in the world. I know I really would. I'd like to wipe it away from everyone. But it's sometimes it's difficult, because you got people that obviously, like myself for many years, even when I knew, were very silent about it and not going to speak about it because of all the problems when you do. But you've got people that when they do, it's difficult when it involves. I mean, if you go on YouTube, for instance, you'll see shocking pictures. I don't like that personally. I'm not going to have a go at anyone that does that, but I personally don't like it, because the last thing I want to see when I look at a video about abuse is to see detailed pictures of actual, bruises and all that sort of thing. And although it is a powerful thing, I think too often it turns people off and turns people away, and I don't blame them, because there's nothing worse if you're a caring person than seeing a child in discomfort or pain, especially when it's been inflicted.
I kind of partly agree with you there. I think it's a powerful visual image to draw people's attention sometimes, but I'm the same. I have never been abused, but I'm a great big strapping bloke. But the one thing I can't watch on television that I will instantly turn off, because I can't cope with it emotionally, is anything that involves children being hurt, abused, or whatever. Because I can't, I'm aware of it. I try and do something about it wherever I can, but I cannot deal with the images of it. It disturbs me too much. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, I understand that. I mean, there are plenty of organisations, well-known, big organisations that do use them, and I'm not sort of knocking them. And that there are times. Yes, when it is used, I think it's just, for me, I think there's a point where it goes. There is a point where it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you show an image of a bruised child and then you go into the statistics and stuff, that most people can cope with. But there are, as all things with the internet, it's a good thing and a bad thing. But there are people that take it that step too far.
Yeah.
And it becomes disturbing. And like I said, it will turn people away that would engage, because that's what I think a lot of it is about. It's about engaging people, and I think, it's like when I write stuff, I mean, some of it does go into details, but I not so much I try and do it in a way that doesn't involve swearing or lewd things. I just don't think some of the most powerful poems I've wrote, they don't need to actually go into sort of those sort of details, and I think they stay in, especially poetry, they stay in people's minds and hearts a lot longer than a visual image that will come into their mind that might be disturbing, that they will just knock away.
Having said that, I think it's time for another poem.
Right, now this one is a recent one I've read. It's called Within the Silence. Clunk, and the shackles went on. I didn't even know it. What had I done wrong? Drip, drip, as my life fled away. It was all too late. Was it me who'd gone astray? Crackle and crack as your life starts to shatter. Deserve it or not, it doesn't matter. Click, an unfastening belt, but this is for real, as you yelp. Smack, whack, crack, and not just words. We have the scars, but it goes unheard. A silent whimper of a love never lost, but these are people you should never cross. A smile, oh happy I am, what a lie, just like unfond I am. A telling of their love, like a bedtime story. Is it all made up? Hear, listen, and be aware. There's a lot goes on within this silence. Can you hear the scraping? Can you hear the banging? Can you hear the crying? Can you hear the whimpering from the one next door? Have you told yourself they must be really bad kids? Oh, that's what it is, but think. Does anyone deserve to be treated like this? When enough say no, we'll break this silence.
That was very moving, John. Within the Silence. Where are you going with your poetry, John?
Well, one of two things, but I have got a book that I'm going to be bringing out, which hopefully will be by January, if not before, which is called Whispers from Within.
Yeah.
But also, just recently, I've done my first commissioned work, which is a poem about Vera Lynn, Dame Vera Lynn, which I'm very, very proud of.
Yeah. Where can that be seen?
That can be seen. It's on an internet radio station's website, and it's Radio Bracknell Forest. But you can also do a link through my blog on my website as well.
And your website?
www.besafefirstalways.com.
And that's the letter B and one ST in first, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
Right. Time, I think, John, for one more poem from you.
Right, yes. Now, I'd like to just slightly change the subject matter here, but this is more to do with poetry, this one, it just in itself. It's called Dead Poets. They killed them. They revived the ones they loved and made dead ones of ones they didn't even know. They mocked the mockingbirds. Oh, I know it sounds absurd. I thought I was okay. You see, I'm a writer first, but they soon righted that. Lucky I'm not a poet. Poetically, I'd be dead. I got the stuff in my head. Sometimes it comes out. I write a story or two. Gibberish, all sorts to bemuse. Sometimes poetry. Shh. It seems it must be free of inside of me. It has something to say. It touches. You feel. And it can heal. Some try and conceal. But even a dead poet can't do that. Poetic justice, methinks. You see. That's why. Poetry isn't dead.
John Harrison, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Braithwaite from Southport, for that Christmas. My special thanks for removing stuff from John Harrison, and I hope you enjoyed the poetry of A.H. Houseman. And don't forget, writeoutloud.net. This is Tony Stringfellow saying, get out and get reading. Till next week. Bye, poem lovers.